understanding breadth, depth, and context. Our next speaker is a senior sales engineer at Exonius. They are a cybersecurity enthusiast with a Security Plus certification, as well as an extensive background in emerging cyber fields like breach and attack simulations, vulnerability risk management, application security, and endpoint protection by holding various roles at Rapid7 and Counter-Strike. Please help me welcome Justin Moss.
All right, testing. Awesome. Well, good afternoon or good morning, and thank you all for joining today's session. Hopefully we can have some fun with this. Of course, as was mentioned before, we're going to be talking about SaaS management and a common sense approach to that process here. So we'll try to keep it interactive as well. So we'll see if you guys don't fall asleep on me before we have our lunch rush here. This is where my marketing team told me to talk about myself. There's already been an introduction, so I'm going to skip that. I do like long walks on the beach and eggnog during Christmas time, so if you care about that, we could be friends that way. We can talk about it afterwards. So the agenda really is to talk about really these 6 key things. The evolution of the SaaS applications, where they started, what kind of questions we should be asking whenever it comes to every SaaS landscape, and how we can go about discovering, operationalizing, and also managing our approach to our SaaS sprawl inside of our environment. If you haven't heard of this chasm or this acronym before, it's called chasm. It's going to be an approach, or more so a methodology, that we've seen a lot of organizations use to be able to take advantage of a better hold of their asset inventory, but SaaS being one of those asset classes to really be able to give us a better hold to that piece as well. And then we'll talk about some use cases. All right. So when we take a look at just pure SaaS spend, there's a handful of different categories that exist on this list. But what we've seen is over the years from 2021 to 2023, SaaS spend has long surpassed the overall budgetary spend in categories for other things across the environment. So you got infrastructure as a service, which is typically the thing that we see a lot of organizations spend a lot of money and put budget towards. But SaaS spend, whenever it comes to corporate spend or user spend, these are the things that we're seeing as we aggregate the data are taking up the most amount of cost throughout the org. And that's really in line with one of the studies that we have put together, and we released this a couple of months back actually. We saw about 66% of percentages or respondents were reporting spend on more of their SaaS applications today than they were a year ago. And we're also seeing about 74% as a whole, they're adopting more SaaS applications throughout the organization, but only 34 are actually worried about the existence of SaaS within the org. So that leads to some posing questions around the overall risk and what's most important to us throughout the organization. And we can jump right into the next slide where we can see things like SaaS misconfigurations. Actually, you guys can read this here. Hopefully you can see this all. We're talking about a couple of SaaS-related incidents that happened in the last year for Slack, GitHub, Microsoft Office 365, and the quotes that we see to the right-hand side or the left for you all, the percentages, they pretty much speak for themselves. So we're seeing an overall increase in spend whenever it comes to the SaaS existence throughout the organization, rather it's managed or unmanaged. And it's clear that whenever it comes to implementing these SaaS applications, we've got hundreds, if not thousands of different configurations across the board for each one of those applications. So there are clear gaps whenever it comes to visibility, the challenges whenever it comes to understanding the security settings for those SaaS applications as well, and really just getting a better hold of what exists throughout the ecosystem. So what we're experiencing, or what a lot of organizations are experiencing, is data sprawl, or better known as SaaS sprawl, throughout your whole ecosystem there. So, simple question, and what I'm curious about, you don't have to answer now, but do you have an idea of how many SaaS applications actually exist within your organization today? Do you know how much you're actually spending on the SaaS apps that exist from the ones that you are familiar with in the organization today? Are they properly configured? When we talk about SaaS configurations or misconfigurations, this has been a part of the discussion ever since we've introduced SaaS into the ecosystem or our environments as a whole, but it's still something that's not really focused on because, again, SaaS is almost like the wild, wild west. It's hard for us to get a really good hold on that or grasp. So how do we go about even understanding the security implications if we don't even know what we have? So there's a lot of talk about cloud security and the shared responsibility model. While we're quietly, as organizations, we're being able to just consume more SaaS applications throughout our organization. So new risks are being introduced daily, monthly, and yearly, right? Most organizations have hundreds of sanctioned applications and also unsanctioned applications or managed apps, or AKA shadow IT throughout the org. So when you put all these things together, lack of visibility for what exists, a lack of visibility for how much we're spending, a lack of visibility for what's configured, what's not configured. One thing is really clear. SaaS applications should be a part of your attack surface if you're thinking about it like that. And with that being said, how can we still look over or still be overlooking the existence of SaaS within our ecosystem? So that brings me to the first part of our agenda, the evolution of SaaS applications. And before I even do a little click through here, give you guys some animations, I'm going to drop us into a scenario. Let's just say it's a Friday afternoon. You're working on the security team, and you're also responsible for monitoring assets throughout your organization. So assets can include your SaaS applications, your users, devices, cloud resources, mobile devices, IoT solutions of the sort. And you're invited to the security incident. Once more, it's a late Friday afternoon. And you learn that the asset in question for this event is a SaaS application. As the actual investigation goes on, you understand not only is it a SaaS application, but you had no clue about the existence of this SaaS app, right? So one, it's devastating for you as a practitioner who is you're tasked with ensuring the visibility for what exists for assets, and SaaS falls under your category. That's devastating not to know that exists. But it also is devastating because of your approach. Now you're having to rework or reevaluate your strategy in terms of how do we discover SaaS applications? How can we be sure that we don't put ourselves or the organization in a position like this again to be able to miss things that exist throughout the org from a SaaS perspective here? So once more, the goal for this talk, this conversation, is to be able to give us some new strategies, maybe some new ideas to be able to discover SaaS applications and go about another kind of approach to help us be able to manage and operationalize what exists throughout the org. But to talk about the evolution, things are pretty flat back in the day when I think maybe 10, 15, even 20 years ago, we had our Cisco devices, McAfee devices, Active Directory to help manage devices, physical devices within the environment, virtual devices. This is pretty easy for us to handle. But then we start adding things like Jira or SAP Concur or cloud storage solutions to really be able to give us better control and visibility for the different kind of solutions or devices and actual systems that we're trying to record within our environment. Going past this, we then start to add more applications because we want to increase the overall productivity for our users. So like Slack, we got Zendesk. And because we have all of these different applications, we have to authorize them through identity solutions. So we're adding things like Okta and Duo and G Suite or Google Workspace for us to be able to administer the identities and push out the applications and give us a better handle on end user productivity, but most importantly, understand what applications are being rolled out through the organization as well. So with us going from more of a flat environment to then rolling out applications for end user productivity and organizational improvements, and then the management from there, we can also start to see that we started to include like things like CASB solutions or XSPM solutions to be able to give us a better sense of management of the identity tools to make sure that as we're rolling out our applications, there's still a level of security that's being implemented at that top level there. Let's skip that. So with the evolution of SaaS applications being explained, we want to jump right into some more questions we want to really ask whenever it comes to what exists throughout the org, and also how we can go about managing our SaaS environment. So I do want to get a quick show of hands, though. I asked this question earlier, and you had a chance to sit on it. Does anyone, by a show of hands, know the exact number of SaaS applications that exist throughout the organization? All right, I see a 0.5% of a raised hand there. I'm going to give that one. Does anyone have a range of SaaS apps that actually exist, or a clue? Okay. We jumped from about 0.5% to maybe about 15. And if you have no idea, show of hands if that's okay. Solid. So that makes sense. Once more, SaaS app landscape, we're all in the same boat. It's the wild, wild west. And how do we go about actually starting with a place that we can get a better understanding of what exists, and how can we go about managing that? When we take a look at these questions here, how do I discover SaaS applications, right? What does that even mean for us? Are there tools in place like a CASB solution or a web proxy for us to be able to pick up traffic? Who has access to the SaaS applications? Once we are administering the SaaS apps throughout the org through our identity provider like Okta, is there a certain level of permissions that are being allowed through the actual IDP solution? Are we tracking the permissions that are being allowed? When we think about shadow IT, if there's an application that's being added to the environment via a user, are they allowing excessive permissions to the onboarded apps that we have throughout the org? A lot of questions, and it's kind of daunting if we don't know what we have in the first place. So one of the things here we have is how CASM can help reduce misconfigurations and vulnerabilities. CASM just stands for Cyber Asset Attack Surface Management. It's something that was coined actually by Gartner back in 2021 in their hype cycle. So we did not come up with that with the organization that I work with, but tools like this really give us a better lens on what exists through the discovery mechanism, and it's all through APIs. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. So where is the data going from that SaaS application? When we talk about, once more, you have your identities that have been rolled out and onboarded through Okta, but you also have an integration with Google, with G Suite or Google Workspace. And your users are also downloading or getting access to their personal instances of GitHub. What's happening between that SaaS application and this interconnectivity from Google Workspace, which also connects to your internal identity provider solution? How can we identify over excessive permissions there, and how can we track and also minimize levels of risk from that perspective? We talked about optimizing spend. That's probably one thing that pays for itself once I can identify what exists and also who's utilizing things within the environment. I actually reminds me of an example with an organization I was working with, and they were looking to bring in about 6 months of data within their overall SaaS spend. And they were expecting about $50,000 in overall spend throughout the org over that 6-month time look back. So we pulled in the data. We were looking at Expensify, SAP Concur, Coupa, things of that nature. And we identified in 6 months, including corporate credit card spend, not just things like NetSuite, they had about $600,000 overall spend, and about 50,000 of it actually was just coming from Grammarly. So the users were overextending permissions and also access from that single app. So spend almost pays for itself once you can actually figure out what exists and also how can we reduce that. And does the application adhere to any of my policies? Are we ensuring that if we have shadow apps or if we have applications that exist, are they putting us or posing any level of risk because they're not adhering to their own level of attestation for SOC 2 or ISO 2700 series, whatever is most important there? So this gets into the chasm piece that I talked about before. Cyber asset attack surface management once more was introduced by Gartner back in 2021, focusing on visibility, vulnerability challenges. If we haven't seen this already, this is just something that really talks about on the left-hand side. You've got chasm, and the rest of the other tools that exist here are good for, cloud WAP, or we have our firewall or next generation firewall. These are all different discovery sources for assets that exist within the environment, and they're all being deployed in their own way or function. What we've seen with Chasm and solutions that implement this kind of approach is they're leveraging APIs for you to be able to better connect to your existing IT security stack and then pull that information in without having to deploy another agent or drop another span port or scanner, and then be able to pull this asset information via API back into the Chasm solution, so therefore you can have more of a comprehensive view of what exists throughout your organization. And when I talk about things that exist, we're specifically referencing assets. And in this case, we're talking about SaaS applications. So this piece right here is a little bit different, the Chasm. It's a different approach whenever it comes to how do we go about identifying things, because it gives you a one single data model. When you think about your SIM, it's typical, we pull logs from everything else that exists and then drop it into your SIM. You may be looking at 5 different ways to search up an IP address. You've got some logs that report an IP as IP_address. You have some logs that are storing IP as a key, as an API key. And ultimately what you're getting from a security practitioner perspective is a mismatch in our data models. We have a lot of logs. How do we go and hunt to find the appropriate key or the value that's going to allow us to triage or remediate the incident? So with the Chasm approach, what it's really doing, whether it's your assets or your SaaS applications, what it's focusing on is normalizing all of your information, so therefore we can deduplicate SaaS application existence or assets that exist throughout the organization. So therefore we can provide a layer of context, so therefore we can have a common data model, right, to take action and work effectively, essentially. All right, so here are some common IT and security use cases. We typically see from a SaaS application discovery perspective, you want to focus on unmanaged and your managed SaaS applications. Once more, if you don't have an approach, it's one of the things that's really hard to do, but leveraging something like a Chasm tool gives us a better handle because we can pull data directly from what already exists for our organization without having to deploy anything else. SaaS application management, really being able to understand what's not working correctly, where are we overspending things within our environment, and then overall SaaS configuration management. This is just talking about best practices for your policies and also what applications are not actually adhering to the security standards that make the most sense within the org. Security use cases, incident response, vulnerability management, that's a big one. Being able to not only detect vulnerabilities for assets, but also being able to detect misconfigurations for Office 365, Salesforce. Those applications alone have tens of thousands of different settings that exist from a configuration perspective. And there are tools out there that give you an opportunity to say, I don't care about the tens of thousands of mundane types of controls that exist for Salesforce. I only want to pull back the information that's security related. And that information gives you an opportunity to say, let's find the vulnerabilities that are, again, over-accessing permissions within the organization from Microsoft 365, or we have all of our users that are not enabled with multi-factor authentication. These are the things that we're really focusing on with Chasm solutions and the vulnerability management piece. All right, so covering your SaaS. Show of hands for anyone who is here. We've been talking a lot about SaaS, but I haven't even asked the question. Does anyone here consider SaaS applications a part of your asset inventory? Okay, talking to the right crowd. I've been talking for maybe 15, 20 minutes, and gives me confidence that I'm in the right space right now. So let's talk about the 3-step approach when we can get a better understanding and also a handle on not only the context, we've got the context now, right? Talked about the evolution, we've talked about a new discovery method. What does it all do whenever it comes to bringing it together and giving us a tool to help out with that? So there's going to be three main things we focus on: breadth, really the ability to discover known and unknown SaaS applications throughout your organization, and then provide a complete and actionable set of processes with that level of visibility into all the data and also the interconnectivity of the applications, managed and also unmanaged. There's going to be depth, where we're going to focus on uncovering and also mitigating various security risks that exist. A lot of things, we've already mentioned them a lot whenever it comes to misconfigurations. Those are the pieces that really put your environment and also your users at a disadvantage whenever you don't understand what kind of configurations are being enabled by default just to access for your users. But they're bypassing a lot of security controls that implement a lot of security risks throughout the organization, or they're not allowing you to track for malicious behavior. And then we'll also bring in context, where we're really going to be able to help take the first two levels, breadth and depth, and be able to correlate the information. Look at the SaaS applications with one data model to be able to understand our devices, our applications, our software, and then make actual actionable decisions with how we would like to handle incident response workflows or discoveries and overall assistance for audits. All right, so we've got step one here, breadth, discovery. Give me an inventory. These are two categories that you may or may not have heard of that help with discovery. We've got your cloud access security broker solutions. These are great for being able to broker access between the applications and also the end users that exist throughout the organization. Now, what we've seen is about 21% of organizations experience cybersecurity events due to non-sanctioned IT resources. Again, not having a CASB in place or not really having something that's going to be able to broker who can use what within the organization. SPM is SaaS management platform. This is really focusing on that the part we harped on before about managing your overall spend, right? It helps you aggregate usage for SaaS applications. You can administer, things from that perspective too. But this is one of the things that can really help you identify who do we have an application sanctioned for, but they're actually not using the application, or they're in an inactive state. We have a premium license that exists, but they haven't used the application in over 90 days. So going over to depth, looking at the configuration, SaaS, security, posture management. That's a big one here. So of course, this is going to allow us to take a deeper step into the misconfigurations, identifying unnecessary user accounts, excessive permissions. About 44% of SaaS user privileges are misconfigured, just from some studies we've been able to pull together from reports I had shown you before. So a lot of compliance risk, a lot of cloud security risk. There's more to show on that piece as well. So then we get into the context. You have all the information. What can we do about that? It's bringing it back to the top level. SaaS is really offering a tremendous amount of value in terms of what we can do with our organizations, how we can take advantage of things. Being able to, tackle this or this comprehensive approach with enabling SaaS allows our users to be productive, allows the organization to take advantage of business strategies. But the modern approach to SaaS management is really going to allow us to discover both the known and unknown SaaS applications, providing a really complete and actionable, list of sets of actions for us to be able to see all the data types and the interconnectivity flows, and allow us to gain a better sense of control for the complexity of the SaaS application landscape that exists as a whole. So whenever it comes to discovering your SaaS applications, it usually starts with a single instance. You got Slack or Salesforce, and those things are quickly evolving throughout the org. Like I mentioned before, we talked about the landscape. We have one or two applications that we've deployed for some kind of productivity or business enhancements for operations, but whether we know it or not, we're adding more from our identity providers, and our users are bringing more applications throughout the org too. So whenever it comes to SaaS sprawl, we're seeing a lot of, like I called out before, a lot of just deployment, and you really want to be able to get a better handle on the discovery from that piece there. Managing the overall security risks brings us back to the point that we called out about the SSPM. We want to be able to understand that if you do have a tool in place, it's going to give you an opportunity to, one, dissect the different misconfigurations from Microsoft 365 or Salesforce or even G Suite, and then be able to cross-reference gaps in security compliances, but also put some kind of level of action to say, hey, we've got these applications that need to be removed throughout the org to go ahead and minimize risk. Another example that reminds me of is we talked about identities. So let's just say you have a developer that exists throughout your organization, and this developer has since been removed from the org. They moved on to another company. And before they were gone, they were a part of a project, a web application project that is now sunset. But the project they were a part of, they had sessions that were enabled for them, or tokens that were enabled for them, from the development to the staging to the developing part of the lifecycle management for that web application. So they had session tokens available for that piece for their own development. This user has been removed. They've left the company. You now go to your identity provider like Okta, and you remove that identity from your environment. So this developer no longer has access via SSO to Slack and Asana and everything else that they have. And because you're a smart SaaS security practitioner, you also know that there's some unmanaged, or there's some managed but non-connected via SSO or your identity provider applications that user also had access to, like NetSuite, for example. So just by removing that identity through Okta, there's still some managed applications out there that are not being managed by Okta that you can go in and remove identities from there as well. So that's you taking an extra step. But application extensions, like their tokens, because this user, this web developer, was able to actually log in via the tokens to those applications. If you're not looking for application extensions as well as removing the identities, that's another gap that we've seen a lot of organizations bypass whenever it comes to reducing the overall scope and risk whenever it comes to protecting our SaaS environment. So just different ways to think about SaaS. It's a big cahoot. It's a wild, wild west. But identity management through your IDP is one thing, but also focusing on those application extensions is another piece that we can help give visibility into and allow you to remove information as well. Another example could be when we talk about those users who are leveraging their G Suite environment to be able to get existence to Box, right? They can download their own instance of Box and start utilizing those resources to improve their overall productivity. And they're just doing the click-through process to be able to get access to the application. But little do they know that they're allowing read, write, and also email read access to their Gmail environment just to be able to use that application. And those are things that are hard for us to be able to track down with the existing tools we have today. And once more, going back to a chasm approach, giving you a comprehensive data model to understand users, applications, but also permissions that are being used for your applications. This is something that provides a lot more visibility for us to be able to identify and then revoke those tokens that have been administered that are giving over excessive permissions or just access to different apps that they should no longer have access to. And then you've got the overall spend. We already gave you all the example for the $600,000 in over 6 months. So this piece right here just provides a lot of value in terms of helping us understand premium licenses. I think one of the things that really goes over notice that I've seen from a lot of organizations is not understanding, one, what we have, but once we get past the discovery aspect, now how can we track the unused, used, and also inactive licenses, and then be able to use dashboards like that to take money from our license cost optimization overspending and put that into other projects that can really help bolster the overall security organization as a whole. So that piece by itself that may not be related to everyone here from a security perspective, but for finance teams, we've seen a lot of value in this being able to really check off some boxes here and allow us to open up some spin in other places where we may have not seen before. So this is a Exonius branded slide. It's not supposed to be product specific, so I'm going to skip that. We're going to jump right into wrapping up the presentation. So if there's any questions, team, I think we have a little bit of time here. I'll be happy to take them now, but if not, I really appreciate you all sitting back and listening to me chat for a little bit. Yes, sir. Yeah. So the question was, how does Exonius do discovery of SaaS? So there's a couple of different methods that we take. One of them is going to be connecting directly into your identity provider, like a Okta or an Azure AD or Ping ID, whatever the case may be. And then that allows us to get visibility into the sanctioned applications, the ones that have been rolled out through SSO throughout the org. And that's one way that we capture managed applications that exist. How we capture unsanctioned or shadow IT, we can connect to your CASB or your web proxy solutions. They help us infer SaaS usage throughout the org, or even your DNS management solutions as well. So, for example, we can have a user that is visiting Expedia.com. Those networking tools will capture that, and Exonius will see that, but we're not going to populate that in your list of shadow IT because that's not really a third-party application that could be posing some level of risk. But if we see a user also visiting Dropbox.com, that's something that we have the models on the back end to help you identify, hey, there's someone that's accessing this application, and these are the logs that we're getting it from, and you'll be able to get visibility there. Those are two forms: direct application integrations and also through those networking solutions. The third piece is going to be through expense repositories like SAP Concur and Coupa and Expensify. Being able to pull back those resources gives us visibility into how the users are spending their credit card data, but also how the organization, maybe through like something like NetSuite, is pushing out SaaS applications that exist throughout the org as well. Added a little bit of TLC to that answer. Hopefully that gave you better clarity versus confusion. Yes, sir. Yeah, so the question was, in addition to SaaS application visibility, what additional context does a tool like Exonius give around assets? Is that correct? All right. So because we do take the chasm approach, we are connecting to your entire IT and security infrastructure via API. So rather you're looking to pull in visibility for your endpoint protection solutions like CrowdStrike or Cylance or SentinelOne, we can connect to those tools. We typically connect to identity access management solutions like SCCM, Active Directory, your cloud solutions. The list goes on. There's over 800 adapter connections. And that leads me to my next point to really answer the question. Whenever it comes to asset management or cybersecurity asset management, there's a list of things that are under your umbrella. Not just SaaS applications, you have your physical devices, your virtual devices, your cloud workloads, your vulnerability management, also your software as well, and also your users. So those are really the big 4 or 5 components that exist in terms of categories, and there are subcategories that exist in each one of those as well for us, but that's really what, if we're talking about Exonia specifically, in addition to SaaS application visibility, what this tool is bringing to you. And that's really one of the biggest differences between a SIEM solution versus something like this. We are plugging into a lot of the different tools that exist out there, but the biggest overlay is that we're gonna capture all the asset metadata and then correlate it for you. So therefore you're not having to do the spelunking yourself to understand, let me deconflict the data to understand what's my source of truth. Is this device actually not these 5 records, or is it just one device, or is it this 5 different records I'm finding from the logs, essentially? Once more, let me know if that was helpful information at all. Any other questions, team? Yes, sir.
Does Exonius or other vendors have anything for like data exfiltration in SaaS products? Like if the user's building 50 gigs of vulnerabilities out of the SaaS
Yeah. So the short answer to that is if there was a tool that you're utilizing today to be able to monitor data exfil, then if it is also API enabled, we can bring that data into an Exonius or a tool like Exonius from that perspective. Now, I also want to be very clear about what kind of information is presented in a tool like Exonius. It's asset metadata. We don't pull in any PII information or anything like that. And we don't pull in data of the, we don't pull in the data, we pull in the data of the data, the things that are collecting said sources, the IPs, the actual assets from that perspective there. But to be able to take that use case a bit further, whenever it comes to identifying, do we have the exfiltration solution on all of the tools or the environments that make the most sense for my environment? Do we have any coverage gaps there? That's where I've seen customers take advantage of, let me connect to Exonius and see where I don't have the existence of this tool throughout my organization, and then be able to use some kind of workflow to push out or notify someone that to get that tool on that part of the network or those devices throughout the organization. That's a great question. Any other questions, team? Yes, sir.
Where do you start? Like, for example, you're at an organization that doesn't have Exonius and isn't going to have Exonius.
Yeah. Yes, the question was, where do we start? We're at an organization that doesn't have Exonius, and they may not have Exonius for some time. So what we've seen is spreadsheets. We love our spreadsheets. Some people, if you work with Python, do some black magic on the back end, you can do the correlation yourself there. That's what I've seen a lot of our customers do. They also come to us with maybe a CMDB. So if we're focusing on devices, right, and versus less on the SaaS application space, investing in some kind of CMDB helps a lot of organizations take advantage of the asset management from that perspective there. The only challenges I see with those two things, of course, is if you're utilizing a spreadsheet, you go into the correlation challenge. You're always manually importing data, and the question is, how do I know that this is up to date and I'm looking at the right device? The other piece with the CMDB, great solution. A lot of options for us with that tool. But that's also typically being managed by a full in-house team, and it can also be manual and cumbersome as well. And if you're not feeding the right tools into your CMDB, that's just another gap potentially from that perspective. But that's typically what I see. If you don't have a tool like Exonius to be able to help you manage your assets from a device perspective, that's where we see our customers go. Now, when it comes to the SaaS application space, everyone's just like, we don't really know what's going on there. We're coming to you guys to get a better handle on our SaaS apps. Or other organizations, I gave you all the breakout for the breadth, the depth, and the context. We talked about SSPM, CASB, SPM. Those are three individual industries that exist from a SaaS management perspective. And they all do really good things, as we called out: configuration management, overall spend, and then also visibility into what applications exist. But what's really given us a comprehensive view of everything, and that's typically where we see, if you are trying to start somewhere, you may not jump into one of those categories, where we see someone would pick up their hat and see if even Exonius could be something that's an option for them there. I know. Yeah, so it's a good question. The question was, does Exonius replace any of the different kinds of categories that I referenced before? Or are we something that sits on top of that? Now, the politically correct answer is going to be Exonius helps augment the visibility and also the workflow for those tools that exist. And depending on what you need from those tools specifically, whether it's asset management or something focused on SaaS application, SaaS management, there may be components of that tool that are over excessive, and because we give we pretty much go an inch wide or an inch deep and a mile wide on different categories for each one of them. That's where I've seen organizations say, okay, this does enough. But again, the primary focus of Axonius is not necessarily meant to displace anything. It is an asset management tool, gives you better asset attack surface management. And I wouldn't ever say it's meant to replace one thing specifically, really help augment what you have. But because of the visibility, because of the reporting component, because we have options to take the data and then do automated workflows as well, I've seen customers displace what exists inside their organization too. Yes. Yes. Yeah. The question was, when it comes to our devices from a virtual machine perspective, do we also have coverage there as well? Yes. So we connect to things like VMware, EXI, hypervisor, things of that nature. So typically what I'll see our prospects or what our customers do is they'll connect to their VMware environment, and they'll look for machines that have been turned on and they're still active, but they haven't been used in X amount of days, right? That's a simple query, easy question to ask, not always an easy question for us to go out or easy answer for us to go out and find and retrieve. That's just one example, but hopefully that gives a bit more context to what you're looking for. And I know this was not supposed to be product specific. We do have a booth out there, so for any Axonius related information, I'll be happy to follow up there as well. Anything else, team? I think I have a couple of minutes left before we wrap things up. Yes, sir. Yeah. 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 So the question was being able to be, with tools like this, how can we effectively do password rotation without having to have the adapt or the tool fail whenever it fetches that set of information? We do have access to password management solutions. So instead of having to input said credentials for a service account for Active Directory, you can do that inside of the actual product integration page to start fetching information, create a service account, enter those creds in that one place, or you can connect with your Thycotic or Key Vault, and there's about 6 or 7 different options we have, and then you can use that token and place that within the security integration tool, and then use that as an option versus having to do it from the actual product itself. And the rotations can take place in your password manager versus you just update the token, right, and then update the actual application integration piece in the tool. Any more thoughts, team? Any last questions? All right. Well, I'm going to still be alive after this, so if anyone wants to have any conversations, like I said, we'll be outside just around the corner. But thank you all for joining today. Appreciate the candid conversation and just listening to what we have to offer here. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy some lunch, please.